Hello, everyone. This is our August Keep Pearland Beautiful garden lecture. We have Barbara Conetti here with us to talk about figs in Brazoria County, and she's a master gardener. So she's going to have a presentation and a live demonstration for y'all. And Barbara, take it away.
Okay, thank you. First thing I'm going to do is upload my presentation and I will speak through it while we're talking. We're going to do two things. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of figs in Brazoria County, and then we'll talk a little bit about caring for the plants themselves. Galveston County has several AgriLife extension areas, and these are the names and the different extension agencies AgriLife. These are the names of the different agents we have in Galveston County through the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Program areas. We deal mostly with Boone Halliday, who is the horticulture. So why Brazoria County for figs? The climate in the upper Gulf Coast area is very much like the Mediterranean area where figs probably were first started. The long, hot summers, the typically mild winters, which are conducive for the growing of figs. In addition, the well-drained sandy soil in areas near Alvin, Pearland, Angleton, Friendswood are also conducive for good fig growth. And the reason why the figs were such a popular item in this area was the access to the rail and the port for distribution through the Galveston and Houston areas. So there's an interesting story that goes with the beginnings of fig production in the Brazoria County. The local law or story was that a peddler came and sold magnolia trees to different farmers. They turned out to be fig trees. And since figs are easy to propagate, the plants spread rapidly through Pearland, Alvin, Friendswood, and nearby towns. They weren't magnolias, they were figs. And so, but the name magnolia stuck for a large preserving fig plant was named after that. But they were not magnolia trees, they were figs. So in Brazoria County, the boom years for fig production was really from the 1900s to about the 1930s. By the 20s, probably between 17,000 and 18,000 acres of land along the coast were growing figs. The towns with the canneries, Alvin, Angleton, Pearland, Friendswood, San Leon, Winnie, LaPorte, all of these areas had fig producing plants and factories. And Brazoria and Galveston counties became really the fig heartland. You can see in that picture that was provided by the Brazoria County Historical Society of them canning some of them. By 1930, approximately 28 fig processing plants were between Beaumont and Victoria. And in Pearland, in particular, there were probably 75 to 100 employees, mostly women, who worked seasonally because figs kind of grow really from May to July. There were multiple plants in Alvin and Friendswood, and then there was a regional network of growers and nurseries in the area. So here we just look at the workforce. 80% of the employees were women, and they were approximately 100 seasonal workers each year. So in the Pearland area, that's a picture there from the Pearland Historical Society of the depot and the where the figs were shipped out. The stock company there was established in 1911, and it was named the Magnolia Fig company, which was named after that earlier story. And it peaked around 1920s, where employment and the shipments via rail and to regional and local markets. I don't know if you recognize any of the names from the people who were working there at the time. Another area was in the Friendswood, where they had two large fig preserving plants supported by the area orchards. J.R. May was one of them, and it operated in the Friendswood area until the late 1960s, shipping approximately 150,000 cases a year at its peak. And if you look at these historic photos, also from Brazoria County Historical Society, it's almost all women that are working there. So here's kind of an interesting look about how it progressed, starting in around 1900 through about 1930. And you can see 17,500 acres are being cultivated with figs. And then there was a sharp decline, as you can see, through the war and then through the urbanization of that area. At the time of its height, they were canning whole figs, preserves, and syrups mostly. But the fresh figs were moved in smaller volumes because they are so perishable. As you know, figs have a very short shelf life. And they're being distributed by rail and through the Galveston and the Houston warehouses. Mostly they were producing the Magnolia fig, which is named after the company. And that was the one that they used mostly for canning, but also the Celeste, which is very predominant right now still, which is, or the sugar fig, as well as the Texas Everbearing or brown turkey strain, which has repeat fruitings over the season. And they were also trying the Alma, the LSU, and the improved Celeste, and the Cadota. So what happened? What was the decline? Well, first, the Great Depression caused closures and bankruptcies among the canneries in the 1930s. And there was a shift of the labor and the market after the war, World War II, as well as the consumers changing their tastes. But then severe freezes, disease on some of the plants caused pressure to close some of the acreages. But the most important reason for the decline of the fig industry was the suburbanization around the Alvin and Pearland and Friendswood areas. Look at this chart. In the 1930s, you could buy an acre of land for about $28 in Brazoria County, which in $25 was about $560 an acre. By the 1970s, you were paying about $982 an acre, which is about $4,800 in 2025 dollars. But in today's market, an acre of land in Brazoria County could be as much as $500,000. And there's no way that the production of figs would allow anyone to, provide a living for themselves at that rate. So if we look at the little timeline where we're starting around the 1900s, we're setting up some of the local orchards and forming companies. By the 20s, we had 17 or 18,000 acres in figs. By the 1930s, 28 fig processing plants between Beaumont and Victoria, and then you start to see the depression, closures, changing in the weather patterns, and then certainly the last Friendswood Pearland operations by the 1970s. So what remains today? They're not growing figs commercially anymore in this area, but they are a beloved backyard tree and plant for locals. and the extension agent still recommends figs to be grown in the yard because they're just great little plants and they do produce annually. So there's more information we can provide you with if you're interested, but let's talk a little bit about the fig themselves. So what is a fig? It's part of the ficus family, probably started in the Mediterranean area. And the fruit is actually the flower inverted. So when you chew on a fig and you have that little gritty taste in your mouth, that's actually the seeds inside the fig. Figs are easy to grow, they're delicious to eat, and they are healthy and nutritious. How do you grow them? Figs need lots of sunshine, they need heat and watering. It can be grown in the ground. It can be grown in pots. They are so easy to propagate. I don't know anyone who has grown figs from seed. Everyone I know just grows it from cuttings, and we'll get into that in a minute. The thing about figs is you can usually harvest after the first year, and pruning and pinching the plant actually increases production. So there are several ways to propagate. I would always recommend using a rooting hormone because that encourages root growth. If you're going to propagate, you can do the putting cuttings in water, in soil, in tea, in fig pops, which we'll talk about in a minute, or even in Ziploc bags. You want to use cuttings that are about the width of a pencil and anywhere from 8 to 12 inches long. Here's a good cutting here. To prepare the cuttings, you want to sanitize them to avoid mold, because once mold gets on a cutting, it's not going to be viable. You make a fresh cut at the bottom, and if you are using a cutting where you've cut the top and the bottom, if you had a long stick and you just cut two pieces from it, you might want to seal the top with some glue or wax to avoid any drying out. So you want to cleanse it real good with a peroxide or a diluted bleach just to make sure there's no mold or disease. You can propagate it in fresh water. I like to use the see-through cup so you can watch when the little bumps and little seed roots start appearing. You just put the cup in a cup of water, about an inch or two of water, just enough to cover the nodes here. And then you change the water frequently, because if it comes cloudy or if it starts smelling, you have a problem. For some reason, using a diluted chamomile tea as an alternative would inhibit any kind of mold growth. By propagating in the soil, again, you scrape, let's see here, scrape the bottom around the nodes just so to get the bark off. And you'd bury the cutting 2 or 3 inches into the soil. Again, using a clear cup is better because then you can see if the roots have started to grow. Use clean soil, use some vermiculite, or mix it with sand. Store the cups in a darker place to encourage root growth as opposed to leaves, and only water it when it's dry. If there's no leaves, then there's no reason to really water too much because it will rot. When you see the roots have really developed around the cutting through the see-through cup, go ahead and up pot it and keep it out of the sun until it has acclimated. One of my favorite things is to air layer. Now, air layering is utilizing a living tree. And so you'd have, say, this is attached to the tree here. You'd pick a couple of nodes like this and clear them away. But first you want to get, say, a water bottle. Cut off the top, cut off the bottom, slice it in half. Fill it with soil. Fill the fill it with soil. And this is attached to the tree. You would just wrap this this branch around, like in there. Mess. You I had sand all over my computer. Sorry, Emily. Okay. So you would wrap the tinfoil around there to keep it warm and to keep the birds out. And you'll be able to see through the roots growing. And once you see the roots growing, then you know it's a viable cutting. Cut it off the tree, plant it just like you would any other rooted plant. Another way is the ground layering. And this is really simple. Find a low-lying branch, scrape again the node, keep it attached to the tree, scrape the node, bury it in the soil right there next to it, put a rock over it, and just leave it for several weeks. The roots will appear. You chop it off above the roots, put it in the soil into a new pot, and keep it out of the sun. So one of the important things is to always annually is to prune the tree and wait until it goes dormant, probably around January. At that time, you're going to want to remove 40 to 70% of the branches. Select 4 or 5, 6 of the really strong branches to keep, and then everything else goes. And I've circled for you so you can see all of that goes. Anything that is not at least at a 45-degree angle needs to be cut away. So if something's crossing or if it's going out to the right or the left, it's got to go. And you prune in the winter when the leaves are all gone. And this will encourage fruit production for next year. Remove any of the secondary branches and all the low hanging suckers. Remove any of the dead wood, anything that's diseased. But all of the good cuttings that you removed, save them because those can be used to propagate and make new plants. Once you have your new plants, you might want to label them if you are mindful of what variety it is. You want to bury your cuttings in clean soil. One of the things to remember, if you're looking at one of your cuttings, the nodes has kind of a smile face on it. And so you know that the smiley face looks up as opposed to this way. Pinch at the top, pinch these to encourage root growth as opposed to leaves. After it has acclimated, lots of sun, lots of water, fertilize, and you'll want to use a higher, the fertilizer comes with 3 numbers on it. The first number is nitrogen, and you want the higher number in the beginning to encourage green leaf growth. Once the leaves have established and the fruit starts appearing, you want to switch to one of those like Super Bloom or something that talks about the higher number, the middle number, which is your phosphorus. And that will encourage fruit growth. And then the best part, the harvesting. Do not be tempted to pick until they're ripe. figs will not ripen if they have been plucked off before they are ready to go. So, like with tomatoes, you can, take them early and they'll ripen on the counter. Figs will not. And the color is, depending on the color, it would show when it's ready. But figs are purple, black, red, green, yellow, striped. So really the color does not determine whether or not it's ripe. You know it's ripe when it starts to get soft and starts to droop off the branch. So if you need more information, please go to the the Texas A&M AgriLife site, because there's a lot of information available there for you. And know that we have a free newsletter that you can subscribe to. You can come visit us over at the Discovery Gardens in Lamarck, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, I think we have about 2 more minutes before we get kicked off of Zoom. So thank you, Barbara, for your presentation.
You're welcome. Would you like me to set up